Welcome back to another episode of Up Next in Commerce. I'm your host, Stephanie Postles, CEO at Mission.org. Today on the show, we have Orlando Zayas, who's the CEO of Katapult. Orlando, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Stephanie. Thanks for having me today.
Yeah, I'm very excited. So for anyone who does not know Katapult, can you tell me a bit about what it is, what you guys do, all the details?
Sure. So Katapult provides non-prime financing for durable goods like appliances, furniture, through e-commerce retailers and omni-channel retailers. So a person might have gotten declined for credit to buy a sofa or a refrigerator, can come to us and we provide a lease-to-own option for them so they can take it home today.
Awesome. Okay, and what does non-prime mean for people like me who aren't really sure?
If you've ever been turned down for a credit card, you'd be considered non-prime.
Okay.
And it's about 40% of the population. It's surprising how big a population it is. I think the Federal Reserve had a statistic a couple of years ago that said 40% of the US population has trouble making a $400 emergency bill. So you can imagine you're a single mother, 3 kids, your refrigerator breaks down, you might not have the money to buy a new refrigerator, but you need to get one right away.
Mm-hmm. Got it. Okay. And you joined in 2017, correct?
Correct.
What was the draw to come to Katapult? Like, what was your vision when you were coming over?
So I ran a company similar to this called Tempo that did mostly brick and mortar lease-to-own and was through major retailers. And what I liked about it was Katapult was then called Zibby, and actually looked to acquire them because one, I liked what they did from an e-commerce perspective. And I really felt that e-commerce is the future, and this non-prime consumer didn't have the capability to shop online because they didn't have the credit to do it. And so they might not have a credit card or they're maxed out on their credit card. And so they had limited options on e-commerce, but yet they were shopping online. And I like the idea of providing, very clear, very transparent transaction to customers so they can make an educated decision. And it's much different than in a store where in a store, you have a salesperson that might be overselling the product, overselling, getting them to buy more than they probably can afford. But in e-commerce, the customers are very educated. They can Google you. They can check out, your financing and see how it compares, and then they can make a decision. So, when I was approached to take over the company in 2017. I really liked what they did from the technology end of it and doing the integration into the retailer's checkout. So, for example, at Lenovo, which is one of our long-term clients, you can go into the checkout and check out with Katapult, and it's real seamless. It takes less than 5 seconds to get approved and less than 90 seconds to complete the transaction. And I like that digital first approach that the company had. Mm-hmm. And I just got excited about it because I think that's the future of retail.
Yeah, cool. So when thinking about the risk element to it, who actually is taking on the risk in the arrangement?
We are.
Katapult. Okay, yes. Fully Katapult. Okay, got it.
We take the risk. And that's I think, an interesting aspect to our business is the retailer doesn't take any risk. Mm-hmm. And so even if it's fraud, for example, we have our own fraud filters. We don't charge back the retailer in any shape or form. Mm-hmm. But then on the collection side, because these are non-prime consumers and they run into financial difficulties, we're very close with the customer around making payments if they miss a payment, trying to get them to ownership as quick as possible because that's what most customers want to do.
Mm-hmm. So did you pull anything from maybe your, history? I think you worked in finance and whatnot. Was there anything there that you kind of pulled into Katapult to maybe help from the risk protection angle or thinking about like how to actually work with consumers maybe in a different way? Yeah,
no, for sure. I worked at GE for a number of years on the credit card side, and that was a machine, right? And I really felt that the non-prime consumer, you've got to kind of handhold them. Mm-hmm. You've got to listen. You've got to be there when they run into financial difficulties. You've got to give them options to try to get to ownership. I mean, nobody wants to miss a payment. I really don't believe that. Most people are good people. They want to make their payments. And so how do you help them get to that point? And we're very flexible. We work really closely. That's why we have, great NPS scores and Trustpilot scores, is that even when the customers miss a payment, we're there to help them get to ownership.
Got it. Okay. So, and you all, I think I saw that you kind of partner with a firm where if like a firm doesn't approve someone, then you guys are like the next layer kind of ready to help that customer. Tell me a bit about that relationship.
Sure. No, that was an exciting partnership with them because, a firm like many of the prime lenders, right? So, I mean, they're mostly prime, and is Synchrony and ADS and some of these other credit card companies. I used to work at Synchrony. They focus on the prime consumer. And so, when you look at approval rates at a retailer for financing and you're applying for financing, they can be anywhere from, 60 to 30%, depending on the retailer and the type of product. Mm-hmm. Well, what happens to all those people that are applying for financing? They need to finance the good, and then they get declined, and especially online. And what happens is, and we've done some testing with some retailers, is that they disappear. And so we approached a firm about a partnership because what we wanted to do is have a waterfall where, you'll apply for a firm that select retailers. And if you're declined, your data comes to me automatically. And then we return, sorry, you were declined for a firm, but here's an option. And then again, it's very clear, it's very transparent, and the customer can make the decision at that time. And so that was a great partnership for us because one, it helps the retailer capture those incremental sales. They don't lose a customer. I think, Stephanie, you've probably, like me, you go onto a website and you don't finish the checkout and you're suddenly getting messages from the retailer. Yeah. Oh, don't forget your card. And so that's the case with financing even more so. If a person can't get financing, they disappear. And so we felt it was a great way to, one, help the customers that need financing for the durable goods, and then also bring an incremental customer to the retailer. I mean, we have a really high repeat rate. Mm-hmm. It's over 50% of the customers come back and lease with us again. And I think that's important because it shows that, one, we treat the customer right. The customer is very happy with the experience, and it's building loyalty not only with us, but with the retailer.
Got it. Yeah, I want to hear a bit more about the customer journey because when I think about, to be clear, I've never used a firm or anything like that. I also don't make big payments or like big purchases too often. But I think what also has held me back is thinking about going through the funnel. I'm like, oh, what will it take to get approved? I don't even know what that looks like. And, how many things do I have to fill out? How do you guys create a process that is not something like in my head right now where I'm like, oh, I can't even start it. I give up.
Well, I'll challenge you to go onto Purple Mattress just for grins and apply for a firm. Because again, you don't have to do anything. You won't be charged anything. You can apply and see the process, but it really is simple. And that's why a firm picked us to partner. Is when you apply for a firm, you are asked the last 4 digits of your social security number and your name and address, and that's pretty much it.
Oh wow!
And so there's very few fields that happen. And so I know the reason why they picked us is because we're able to take that same data, pull up all your information, make a decision on whether to approve you or not. And it happens literally within 5 seconds. So there's not a ton of information that is being asked of you, both on the Affirm side and on our side. I think that's why they partnered with us. It was always kind of eerie when we talked to them. We showed our application flow and their application flow, and they're almost identical. Oh, and so I think it was a logical choice for them to pick us to partner with. But it really is simple, and I think that's the opportunity with e-commerce is you've got to make it as simple and transparent and easy as possible because, we've all sat there waiting, maybe you haven't because you haven't applied for credit online.
I'm so risk adverse. I stay away from everything apparently.
You apply because you need a loan and you see that hourglass spinning and if it takes more than 5 or 10 seconds, you're like, God, I'm not going to get approved. And then you bail. And that's why that speed was so important, making a decision. And literally you go through the process, you'd be surprised how fast you get an approval.
Yeah. Okay. That's awesome. So now with the holidays coming up, what are you guys seeing right now on your side? Because I've heard that, consumers are ready to spend right now. This is like the season that is going to be better than it has been the past couple of years for retailers. So what are you seeing on your side? And how should retailers prepare for this, actually?
Yeah, no, I think that the problem that retailers are going to have is, the supply chain issues, right? Yeah. Can they get the product? I mean, one thing that I noticed this holiday season, at least, and the discounts weren't as heavy as they were in previous years. And I think that's because they probably don't have as much product as they had in previous years.
Yeah.
And so they're not having to discount them that much to get people to buy them, but the demand is definitely there. I mean, the customer is out shopping. The store traffic is better. I don't think it's as good as maybe 18 and 19. It's definitely better than it was in 2020 because I don't think people were going to the stores. And then e-commerce is about the same. I think e-commerce picked up during COVID, especially during the lockdowns, because there was no other way to buy things and demand is still there. And so I think it elevated e-commerce shopping so I read some reports that said, it moved e-commerce shopping 10 years ahead.
Yep.
And it continues. So, we're excited about the holiday season. It's always from Thanksgiving until pretty much New Year's is usually our best time of year.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to use this year as kind of a case study to see what does it look like if, retailers aren't discounting as much. The demand is still there. I think it would make me question anyways, like, should I even discount like I have been doing for the past 10 years? Like maybe that's not as much of a driver as one would think.
Yeah, well, I think it's all supply and demand too. I mean, the reason they're not discounting is there's not as much supply. I think when they have a lot of product, they have to discount because they're competing with other retailers. So I think right now it's just, some of the supply chain issues are driving down inventories, and that is allowing them not to discount as much. But I think once that returns to normal, which I believe it will happen next year, then you'll start seeing some of those discounts come back again.
Yeah. Have you seen retailers doing anything strategic to handle the lack of supply that they have, where they're like, you can buy it now and then get it next year, or something to like get ahead of that and still sell as much as they want to?
I think online, because we're again 95% online, it's a little different because it is usually buy it and ship it right away. And so what happens is we see customers they'll cancel their transaction and go and get maybe the purple one that is in stock, and they'll change their behavior a little bit. But I haven't seen anything on the retailer side other than trying to build that inventory. I think the brick and mortar retailers probably have it a little easier because I went to a Best Buy, the week before Thanksgiving, and I've never seen so many boxes stacked up. I mean, I was
Costco,
like, wow.
Same. No
I was
there.
like, I guess you're not having supply chain issues.
because they own the entire ship coming over. So
exactly.
They're like, we're good.
Exactly. So I think they had it a little easier because they were able to build up their inventories, where an e-commerce retailer that's kind of like doing just-in-time shipping might have had a little bit of a struggle, but not too much.
Yeah, got it. I want to hear a bit about the difference between, well, not the difference, but your thoughts on the buy now, pay later option, which I've definitely heard of a lot of people doing that, and then lease to own, which I haven't really heard of retailers offering that outside of auto and maybe homes back in the day. But tell me a bit about how you're seeing the lease to own section kind of pop up.
Yeah. So the way we look at, buy now, pay later is so generic, right? It's buy now, pay later, pay later. Yeah. It could take any form and function. I believe the buy now, pay later is really a function. It kind of took off in recent years, and it's the split. I call it the split 4. So you can buy a pair of jeans and split it over 8 weeks, and there's no interest, and you just pay 4 payments over 8 weeks on your credit card or debit card. That has exploded because, you can go down to $50. I think, Amazon has some really low price points where you can split it. And so that I think has exploded because you can buy things and split the payments and makes it maybe a little easier. Where it gets a little tricky and where I think lease to own comes in is on the bigger ticket items. So once you get over $300, splitting it over 4 may be a little bit more difficult, especially when you get into, appliances. $1,000 refrigerator, for example, you're going to have a hard time splitting it over 4 payments. And so that's where I think we separate. And then if you look at the demand from the consumer, if the customer has access to credit, they'll probably find out another way to pay it, right? They might have a credit card they can put it on. They might apply for the private label financing, and they can figure out a way to pay for it. It's the customers that don't have access to credit where lease to own comes in, because we can approve people that got turned down for the credit card, maybe don't have access on their current credit card to put it on, but they need that item and they need the furniture, because we specialize in durable goods. These are items people need every day for everyday living. And so we help that customer that got turned down for credit, maybe doesn't have access to credit, but it's a bigger ticket item. It's not a $100 pair of jeans. It's a $1,000 refrigerator. Mm-hmm. And then the way that the lease works is very similar to a car lease, that you have monthly payments, and we actually split the payments over by whatever the customer gets paid. So if they get paid biweekly, they'll have biweekly payments. They're not paying anymore. They're just, we try to make it easy for them to pay us back. And then at any point in time it's a 12-month lease, at any point during the time, they can pay off the lease. And if the first 90 days, they can pay it off for 5% or less of the fee as a fee. And then after that, we discount the lease payments for the rest of the time. So we put control in the hand of the consumer. We communicate with them often to say, hey, look, you're in your 90 days. You can pay it off for $1,050, $1,050, that $1,000 refrigerator example. And then afterwards, we communicate with them along the way to let them know when they can pay. So if they get a tax refund, or they get a bonus at work, or a stimulus payment, they can get to ownership as quickly as possible. And what we found, and I think where we're different in the marketplace, is that we found that if we get customers to ownership as quick as possible, they come back. Mm-hmm. And that's what we want. We want them to be happy. We want them to feel pride in ownership, and we want them to come back and do it again. And that seems to work because, as I mentioned earlier, we have over 50% of our customers come back and lease with us again.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, it seems like that entry point is really special and valuable to consumers who maybe have never had that before, because that's a whole mindset shift when you're able to finally own something that maybe you thought you would not be able to, or couldn't even buy before that. I could see that just changing the whole landscape afterwards.
Yeah, it does. And unfortunately, these customers in the past would have to, go to a pawn shop and pawn some things, go to a payday lender, they'd have to borrow money from their uncle, mm-hmm. Find other ways to pay to get the items that they need. Because again, these aren't luxury items. These are durable goods that they need for everyday living.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. So when thinking about Katapult, I want to hear a bit about your growth, within the company and how you've been hiring. I know you guys had a SPAC that you went public on. So I want to hear all the details around like what it's been like the past couple of years, seeing that growth.
It's been fun, exciting, crazy. There's a ton of words I can use to describe it. When I took over the business in 2017, we were doing roughly 17 million in revenue. So it was small. But I knew that this could be something, especially since we were focused on e-commerce and if we position it the right way. And really, it was all about hiring the right people. And I've found that throughout my career, whether I was at GE or wherever I was, is that you got to put the right people in the right seats and let them do their job. Mm-hmm. And so I brought my CFO in with me. She was my previous company with me. I hired a really hotshot risk leader who she is amazing around modeling and underwriting. And then the COO, he executes. He just knows how to get things done. And then you just continue to build out the team that way, and then let them do their job. And so we focused on, going after those retailers that felt the same way we did about this market. We focused on the technology. We hired a pretty sharp CTO who, knew the space, understood the checkout. And we focused on technology, and then we focused on selling. And I think those things all came together, and we started doubling the business every year. And then we were in 2020, we took off with COVID. Because people were stuck at home shopping, yeah. But yet they might not have had the finance capability to finance it. So we took off. The business continued to grow. We had an amazing year in 2020, and that's when the board decided, hey, have we thought about what are our options going forward? It's some venture capital guys in there and some strategics in there in our cap table that said, how can we continue to grow this business, get us access to capital? And the SPAC idea came up, and I'll be honest with you, I remember when somebody said, "Hey, let's go public via a SPAC," and I had to look it up because I didn't know what it was. Yeah. so I quickly got educated on what a SPAC was. It sounded exciting because I know from other companies that I've worked for, going public takes a long time, takes a lot of build. And so this felt like a much faster, more exciting way to do it. and yet gave us access to capital. So we were building up our balance sheet with cash so we could invest in the business. And when we closed the transaction in June, we got an extra $50 million. So we're sitting on $100 million of cash on our balance sheet that is enabling us to hire the salespeople, hire the tech people, and really create, continue to be in the forefront of e-commerce shopping and helping these retailers, tap this incremental customer base. So it was exciting. I mean, I rang the bell at the NASDAQ. That was probably the highlight of my career. It was great. And the team was energized by it, obviously. And, but now we're a different company. We're not a startup anymore. We're a public company. Yeah. And I think there's challenges with that too, because you have to, you hire different people than you've hired before. And so, we've had a few people leave recently and because they said, look, I liked working for a startup. I want to go work for another startup. Yeah. And I understand that. I'd say more power to them. And then we hire people that, understand a public company and what it takes to be a public company. So I've learned a lot in the last year and a half. A tremendous amount about what it takes to run a public company, and it's a lot more than ringing the bell at the NASDAQ, that's for sure.
Yeah. What were some of the biggest surprises with now that you are running a public company? Like, what were some surprises that you didn't anticipate, no one told you about, and you're like, here I am, I have to do this now?
It's a long list. I think just the scrutiny of, and I knew public companies are always under a little scrutiny. I remember working for a company years ago, and they said, "Oh, you missed your earnings by a penny, and your stock just craters." So there's that scrutiny of hitting your numbers. There's the audits and SEC regulations and things like that. That you've got to hire the right people that understand this, because you don't want to trip and fall on those types of things. So it really is about I think if you look at an IPO takes anywhere from a year to 18 months. A SPAC can get done in, we got our SPAC done in 6 months. I now know why you need a year or a year and a half, because you've got to build that expertise. And you're just doing it by, like a fire hose.
Got it. So would you, if you were to do it again, would you take the shorter route and maybe just go through the traditional IPO process so then you could kind of learn a little bit more slowly than you had to?
It was an exciting way to do it during the SPAC. But if I was taking another company public, I'd probably take it the traditional route. I think you just have time to build, what you need to build from a public company perspective. But, a SPAC is an exciting way to do it. And it gets you the capital that you need quickly and get your name out there. And, I was excited because I got to pick the ticker symbols.
Yeah.
And we got
that is pretty sweet. So,
I'm not going to say I wouldn't do it that way again. But it just depends on, your life cycle in the business, right? And where you are in business. And I think we were ready. We probably needed a little extra time, but, we made it happen. And I think that's the other piece of it is organizations, when you're faced with that type of timing, you go fast, and it's some of the things you do are almost, you look back, you go, wow, that was amazing. And I don't know if you spread it out over a year and a half, whether you're going to have that same excitement. I don't know.
Yeah. And I feel like the team that you have who can go through that, like they're the ones you want to keep. They can kind of go through all that craziness, come out and be like, "Whoa, we did it. Okay, on to the next."
Yeah, exactly. And that's where, but that's usually a high growth company, right? They feed off the adrenaline of the growth, and going public just fed on that as well. Yeah.
So are there any Moonshot projects you're working on? Any secret projects that you're like, I don't know if this is actually going to work, but we're trying this out?
If there were secret projects, I couldn't tell you.
But you could tell me though. Or just like Moonshot thinking right now.
Yeah, no, I mean, we're looking at reinventing the way people shop in store, right? Because in store, the problem with in store and not to disparage salespeople in a store, but they have one thing in mind: they want to sell more. And what happens is sometimes the training and education of financing tools in a store is difficult. And so, how can we kind of upend that process, put the power in the consumer's hands, so the consumer sees exactly what they're paying, how much they're paying, what the terms and conditions are, and they can make that decision even in the store without a salesperson really having to even talk about it. And so I think that's exciting to us because one, we have a big group of customers that are, that are loyal to us. They come back to us again. Now I want to be able to send them into the store and do the same thing in a store, because sometimes you can't get everything online, right? And give them more flexibility to go to either other retailers that we have signed up, or maybe just another retailer, and give them the same power that they have online in a store. And I think changing the way it happens in store on the financing side has got to change, because there's all kinds of dead bodies in the wake of financing companies that messed up in store, and I'm not going to let that happen. I think it's the right thing to do for the consumer as well. And then we're looking at what other products can we bring to our consumers that help them build their credit, and how can we provide education and things like that, so that we're not overburdening them from a debt perspective. We're just helping them get the tools to build their credit over time, so that they can graduate. One of the things we have partnerships with a firm is we have two agreements with them. We have the waterfall that I described earlier, but we also have a graduation program, where if a customer comes to us that they declined and they actually make all their payments, we'll share that data with them so they can make them an offer for an installment loan that helps build their credit and gives them a cheaper way. And I think it's my goal is that I want to give the customer the best financing option for their situation at the time. And if it's with somebody else, I'm okay with that.
Very cool. Yeah, thinking back to the in-store, like how to get this to people in store, I'm just imagining like the sales associates like, do you want a credit card? Do you want it? I'm like running away through the aisles like, no, I don't want anything. Leave me alone. But like,
they all usually get incentives.
I know they're even dinging the bell like, good job, Joanne. Like, just got another one. I'm like, was that me she just got? I don't know. But thinking about like a tablet that you could just kind of go to, see really quickly. Oh, I qualify.
Or just do it on your phone.
Or do it on your phone. Yeah.
Do it on your phone yourself. And so you don't have to talk to anybody in the store. You can just do it on your phone, and then maybe you show a barcode or something like that to get the transaction done. They don't know.
If you're on your phone, would it matter what location you're in? Like, does it even matter? No. Okay. That's great.
But there's obviously technology around knowing that somebody's in what type of store, whether it's a furniture store, electronic store, so you can kind of make decisions on underwriting that way. But there's a lot of technology out there that we're working on and developing around how do we get that customer, again, make it a customer-friendly transaction, whether it's in the store or on the e-commerce that's clear. I mean, one of the things I've been adamant about is we've got to be fair to the customer. We've got to be clear and transparent to the customer. They got to know what they're paying, and that shows up.
How are you finding customers right now? Because I'm thinking about the customers that, almost apply, they get denied, like you said, they disappear. Like, how are you finding the people who maybe you don't even know to look for credit?
Well, obviously we do some marketing ourselves, but we rely on the retailer. Once the retailer realizes that this market, one, is shopping on their site, and it becomes an incremental customer, then they're more likely to start marketing towards this customer, which is, again, different, search engine optimization, all the tools that retailers use to drive customers to their site. They would change. They could change the way they market to certain groups of people because they realize these are incremental customers that they thought weren't shopping on their site at all. And so we work with the retailers to help them identify this customer. The marketing tools, obviously we do some marketing on their behalf to our current customers to get them to come back to the store or the website. And so I think it's a combination of all those things to drive the incremental business, but it really is around the retailer acquisition. So our acquisition costs are really low compared to a lot of e-commerce businesses because we rely on the retailer, we partner with the retailer, but we're also educating the retailer on how to target this customer.
Yeah, got it. That's awesome. All right, let's shift over to the lightning round. The lightning round is brought to you by Salesforce Commerce Cloud. This is where I ask you a question and you have a minute or less to answer. Are you ready, Orlando?
I'm ready.
All right. Go. What's the best piece of business advice you've received since becoming CEO at Katapult?
Best advice is hire the right people and get rid of the wrong people fast.
Yep. Yeah, that's always a good one. What's a book that you keep coming back to, like year after year? You're like, I want to check back in on this.
Yeah, it's Execution by Bossity, I think is the, I always hate to get the, it's an amazing book. And it talks about, and I think I even mentioned it earlier in the talk, that you got to hire the right people and put them in the seats on the bus, and then they'll help you drive the bus in the right direction. And I've always felt that way. You got to hire the right people and they'll help you drive the business.
Yep. I'll have to check that book out. Sounds like a good one. What's one thing you don't understand today, but wish you did?
Nuclear fission. No, I'm kidding.
Hey, that could be an answer.
there's a lot of things I don't understand today. Let's see, what I don't understand today. I mean, there's so many. I'm trying to think. Like how the macro, economy is affecting inflation. I loved economics when I was in college. I still don't. I know we print money and things like that, and I still, you talk to two different economists, you get two different answers. So I'd like to know more. I think if I went back to school, I would major in economics.
Yeah, I want to know what's happening with inflation too. So when you find out, come back and let me know, because it's gone wild.
Right.
Okay, if you had a podcast, what would it be about, and who would your first guest be?
It would be about life experiences. I mean, I love reading autobiographies too, or biographies, not autobiographies, biographies, and about success stories. People that have started from nothing and how they did it, because it's always fascinating to me when somebody is successful and how they got there. And there's different avenues for everybody, and you can learn from every single one. And that's probably my second favorite books are biographies.
Yeah, same. That's great. All right, and then the last.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. No, you're good. That sounds great. Last one. What's the nicest thing anyone's ever done for you before? Ever?
Nicest thing. Oh my God, there's so many. For me, nicest thing. There was a party that my team threw for me when I reached, and this wasn't at Katapult, but it was a previous role, when I reached 5 years, and it was an amazing party, and they gave me some really interesting gifts, and it was a surprise party, and I was really shocked at it, but they gave me there was a I had a 360 review where they said where they had to give feedback on me, and one of my employees, who never admitted to it, said, "If feedback is a gift, Orlando's the most giving person I know." And it was actually a compliment, because I think it's important to give feedback, but also take feedback. So when I left, they threw me this party and they gave me a bat that was inscribed with that, and they all signed it. And so it was endearing. I still have that bat today, because it was the coolest, recognition of, we didn't like the feedback sometimes, but it all made us better.
Yep. As it always does. Yeah. I love that. That's great. Sounds like a good team.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Orlando, thank you so much for hopping on here today and joining me. Where can people find out more about you and Katapult?
I am on Twitter and LinkedIn, and of course, Katapult.com. And we have our investor relations site, as well as more information about us. And I'm in the process of building OrlandoZayas.com. So hopefully there'll be a website shortly.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Thank you.
All right, Stephanie. Thank you again. Appreciate the time.